All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Dispersing the Fog, episode 43. My name is Adam Rogers, here with Paul Palango, the intrepid Paul Palango, and welcome everybody to the show. Paul, we had a big response to our first show of 2026 last week, and we've got some more interesting stuff to cover this week. How are you doing?
Well, that show gave me a lot of work during the week. I was up late at night a number of times, and people are interested in police agents. Like, what do they do? And I've been learning more since the dam broke, and this story came out, which appears to show that Peter Allen Griffon was an RCMP agent. Now that that's on the record and it was in an official document, ignored or missed by everyone, I have some theories on that that we'll get into with our guest.
Hmm.
Um, but it's just things are starting to flow. I'm getting information I never got before.
Yeah, and so welcome welcome to our new viewers and listeners. We gained quite a few last week just from that topic, and so Peter Allen Griffin being the guy, just to remind people, that supplied the decals to Gabriel Wortman, which he put on, a plain white vehicle and turned it into a replica RCMP cruiser, and then was able to drive around, with a fair amount of freedom during the Nova Scotia mass shootings. So we find this document. We didn't find it, but Ryan Potter did, and so we talked about it last week. How this Peter Griffin had a handler, was fairly certainly an agent, and the implications of that. So we have a guest this week. We've heard from before, Paul Derry. He was on our show a couple of months ago, and he is in the business, so to speak. Paul,
A former agent
yeah.
for the RCMP, and as Paul Derry explained in his um, people remember him in his car talking to us from inside a car
Yeah.
from an unknown, undeclared location. And Paul Derry was involved in, one of the things he was involved in back in the day, controversial enough, when he was an agent, he tried to warn the RCMP that someone was going to be murdered in Halifax. And what happened was the Mounties sat outside the house and let the murder happen,
Yeah.
and then tried to blame Derry for it.
Yeah.
Uh, and so he has some interesting insights into how this works. And I think you're going to find what he has to say today riveting. And we also have, I've come across a couple of other agents former agents I've been working with, hoping to get them on the show. I've let you in on one of
Yeah.
those things this week. Interesting, isn't it?
Well, it sure is, and it's the impression that I get from all of these guys is guys, guys so far. It seems to be mostly, if not exclusively. The There's not a lot of shared information necessarily from one force to another, or even from one detachment to another, as to who's handling a certain individual. In some cases, maybe at the higher levels there is, uh, but there don't seem to be hard and fast rules, protocols, and everything on how these things are handled. Or if there are, they're often broken.
And zero accountability.
Yeah. So I mean, these are of course one can imagine that they'd be quite valuable as a technique in law enforcement, but boy, they can go astray.
Well, one of the conversations that I had this week was with a former agent who recounts coming face to face with an RCMP staff sergeant, and the staff sergeant had his officers really harassing this guy and trying to find out who he was. And the guy talks about going into the office and saying to the staff sergeant, um, "I'm on your side." And he said, "Well, I don't have you listed on my roster." "No, you wouldn't. You have no idea. But there's more of me in the community than just me." And even the staff sergeant didn't know about it.
Yeah. So isn't
And that shows you how difficult it is to penetrate a story where there are suspected agents involved, as we've been doing for 6 years now in the mass casualty shootings.
Part of it seems to be that it gives other individuals within a detachment or up the line deniability, right? If they, all right, well, things are kept close to the vest and only the handler really knows all the details, well, then anybody above that can deny knowledge and make that an official denial of sorts in cases, right? So,
And before we move on, I hope in
yeah.
the next couple of weeks to bring some of those former agents in here and talking about it.
Well,
They're a little
yeah,
nervous
yeah,
for obvious reasons, but they all sort of are telling the same story, and they're all bona fide former RCMP agents.
yeah. Well, given the revelation from last week about Peter Allen Griffin, I think people are going to be interested to learn more about this world and how that all operates. And so we'll learn more about that from Paul Derry later in the show here. Not before very long. We're going to get Paul coming on in a few minutes. So, Paul, otherwise, there's been lots of things in the news this week. By the way, just one of the things I was involved in this week. Friday, I was had the honor, privilege, whatever you want to say, of attending a pipe ceremony. I go to the Gladue Court in Wagnacook, and so the elders in the community invited the court staff, lawyers, judge, and court staff to a pipe ceremony to, to reflect on all that we do. So it's, deep, meaningful, all that experience. But, sort of after it was done and on the sidelines, a lot of discussion about the premier and the Nova Scotia government's approach to Indigenous relations. And people are very upset about the premier, justice minister trying to order the RCMP to go, investigate dispensaries and go on reserve and, come in with a heavy presence and they don't appreciate the approach and don't think it's justified and all that. So we're going to see more of that, I suspect.
Well, the RCMP as a policing First Nations communities across the country has problems.
Yeah,
It's not liked. It counter to what it says in its own public relations, which is garbage. This force is should be on its way out, and the First Nations communities are not wrong that the federal government is not doing a good job at this. The RCMP is doing a terrible job, and something bad's going to happen. I don't even have to go to my friend the pumpkin to see that. I mean,
no, it's pretty clear, and for it's difficult. It's some like because they do not that being the Mi'kmaq people do not they don't like the RCMP. They're scared of them. There was one story of a guy driving around talking about driving around with his father when he was younger, him and his brother, and his father would if you saw an RCMP, lay down, they'll steal you. Like that's still there. You know, that mindset. So something to
and
watch
speaking
for.
now, and you're in Cape Breton. One of my favorite stories in Cape Breton this week was finding a live grenade
Oh,
thrown through
yes.
the window of a business in Sydney, Nova Scotia. And they had to, the military had to come in and explode the grenade and stuff like that. But I thought, geez, in the mass casualty, the story that's always ignored and never really referred to is Gabriel Wortman, the shooter, had cases of grenades.
Yeah.
It never becomes an issue. Nobody ever talks about it. Was this one of his grenades that sort of filtered through the community, or do other people have grenades?
Dude. Remember Lisa Banfield, and she cut herself off when she was given this part of the statement, but when she was hiding in the woods, or by her account, she didn't want to go into this truck that was nearby the warehouse
Yeah.
because she was worried about just that it would be an easy target for a grenade. But yeah, they're down in Cape Breton. This guy is a an interesting cat that owns uh, the store. It was on Pitt Street in Sydney, which is it's 2 blocks away from Center 200, where the U18 Women's World Championships have taken place this week, featuring Guysborough County's Kendall Dwyer I'll mention. But this ideal car care center owned by Hugh D. Smith. And Hugh D. Smith, among other things, a couple of years ago got in trouble. He It's the business is Ideal Car Care Center, and I'm almost sure it's the same guy that got in trouble a couple of years ago for towing a prosecutor's car away from a gym in Sydney. She had prosecuted, he had a whole bunch of fines, and like 2 weeks prior, she had, he was looking for a discount, a major break. She didn't give it to him, and all of a sudden, he tows her car and wouldn't give it back to her that night. So there was a whole situation there too. Towed it actually twice. He's being sued by a few different people. So anyway, sounds like the kind of guy that might have a grenade thrown through his window.
Well, it doesn't really surprise me. I don't know if there's any biker connections in this, but the word I'm getting from everywhere on all sides of things, from the biker community, the police, or whatever, people are expecting a ramp up in violence. It's been pretty quiet for a couple of years because of the activities of the sort of the growing Satan's choice, uh, right across Canada, but especially in the Maritimes, where Harley Guindon, who's the son of Bernie Guindon, the original founder of the Satan's Choice in Ontario, and the father, his nickname was Bernie the Frog. Bernie the Frog patched over to the Hells Angels eventually and retired like in 2006. Now his son has carried on this legacy, and he's bad mouthing Hells Angels online openly. And tensions are starting to build. I understand that there was a working relationship between a lot of these gangs, Bacchus and gatekeepers and whatever, but now the Satan's Choice are just giving the middle finger to the Hells Angels and calling them wimps and things like that. Uh, there is going to be some violence, I think, historically, and the police are telling me this, and the bad guys are telling me this.
So sorry, one thing just caught my attention. You said he retired from
Yeah.
the biker. Do they have a pension plan or mandatory retirement age? How does that work?
I think they retired. And I think they get a tattoo, like an exit tattoo. They got an
Okay.
entry tattoo. Usually up here, I've seen a couple over the
Yeah.
years, and they have an X one left the game at this date.
Well, you never know. I mean, they're a big organization. Maybe they've got a whole HR department that handles those kinds of things.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to deal with their HR department. I get a bad feeling about that.
Yeah, the disciplinary process there is probably different than it would be at any
Yeah.
other major corporation. Well, Paul, we have a few other stories that we'll get to maybe later in the show. I
Mhm.
see Paul Derry is there. He's ready to join us.
Sure.
Um, what The other thing we wanted to talk about, which was the major news story this week, was the Minnesota ice situation. You have thoughts on that maybe before we bring Paul in? Just take a couple minutes or
Well, it shows you what happens when you have people who are not trained and not accountable. Um, this my view of it is this woman was scared, tried to get out of the situation and steer away. And she was shot in the head from the side. There was no way he was running her over. He was out of the way. In fact, he was taping her on his phone beforehand, which was totally unprofessional.
yeah,
And then shifted his gun and he was ready to shoot and shot her in the face. That was his warning shot.
yeah,
And then the other disturbing thing about it is the federal government in the state says, no, Minnesota, you can't investigate it. We're protecting this guy, and you have the president. Remember in the days not so long ago when politicians and judges and police never said anything about the guilt of people because this may affect the case,
yeah,
the outcome of the case. Now you have the situation where all the authorities at the federal level, including the president, are saying, "Oh, that was a righteous shooting. He was lucky to escape with his life," as Trump put it. No, he wasn't. He wasn't in any danger from what I could see.
none. It's so when this story first broke, I'm I try to hesitate. This is what I was thinking, all right, because I saw some of the statements from Kristi Noem and from the president and from others calling it domestic terrorism and that she weaponized the vehicle. I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound I'm sure there's more to it, but I'm going to withhold judgment. My inclination was to be, against the ICE theory and the president's theory. But I'm like, okay, well, but I should watch the video first. And then you watch the video and it's like, oh my God, obviously there was nothing to this. Like she was, parked in ICE was in the neighborhood, all these things. But when you watch the video, it's just like, all right, she was just driving away. Like,
But then
hey,
you're saying the other disturbing thing about this, and we've seen this in many of the cases we've worked on, people at the extremes, the extreme left and the extreme right, especially the extreme right, don't see the truth. They see what they want to see. You know, the left makes its mistakes too, but they tend more to see in an event like that, at least be objective about the truth. Generally, that's what I see. The right-wing people, it's like this was an attack on a nice officer. She didn't follow orders, or she didn't obey orders. Well, the orders quite clearly, even listen to the tape, are contradictory.
yeah,
Like, get out of here, try to open your door. You
yeah,
know, and this is somebody who got scared. And it disturbs me that you've got right-wing Neanderthals basically right away taking up the party line. Oh, this is a righteous shooting. Get rid of them all. Shoot more of them. These people are crazy. I know.
yeah.
Look in the mirror and say that enough times, and you're going to realize you're crazy. You're cuckoo.
Yeah, it's bad. They wouldn't allow a doctor that was on scene to attend
No, no, nothing.
to Renee Good, and
Oh,
yeah,
wait.
not
That
allow
happened with the
investigation.
RC with the mass casualty. Heather O'Brien,
Yeah,
RCMP wouldn't allow anyone to come in, the helicopter to come in, family to see her when she's lying there, and her heart was beating for 8 hours.
it's
You got
so
policemen and authorities who are so hidebound and so sure of themselves that they're not objective and
no,
they're not rational.
and not allowing the state officers to investigate. You would think that overlap, that oversight would instill confidence in the public, but of course they're not interested in that. A minor little thing, Paul, that kind of bugs me when I hear it. Even though I agree, I guess, with him in a sense. The mayor of Minneapolis was, told ICE to get the F out, except he didn't say it that way. He said it in full. When did when did politicians at this level start cursing in public? I see it more and more. I don't like it. I don't think it's
Well,
appropriate.
Donald Trump helped.
Yeah, I guess
As
it
he says
brought
everything.
the whole,
He has no filter whatsoever, and he's brought decorum down to the basement and below,
yeah,
and public decorum has just gone out the window. People are used to being on Facebook or on social media. The keyboard warriors saying whatever they want from a point of anonymity, and there's no feedback. It's just filtered right into the community now. It's not a good thing, but.
all right. No, I know people are following that, so I knew they'd be interested in a little discussion on the Minnesota situation. There are some similarities to what we've been covering here, and it's just a policing issue, but it's completely ramped up down in the States to another level. All right, so that's good. We have a few other things we can talk about after, but let's bring in Paul Derry here and get into our main topic. Here it is. I wonder if he's going to be in a car, another vehicle. Who knows? Got to keep the Pauls straight here too today.
His sound is off.
Yeah. Sound is off, the video's off. This is it's great podcasting material here. All right, here he is.
There he is, sideways.
Let me see if I can fix that.
Yeah, it's like you're leaning in for an album cover shot. Back when they made albums.
Yeah.
See, this is the problem without having my teenagers around to fix all this stuff for me. Oh, That didn't work.
Might be a matter of just flipping the phone itself, Paul.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
There you are.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Is there any better there? Okay, let's see if we can.
Oh, I missed you being inside your car like the last time. It was very
Just let me get the
authentic.
volume up here. The volume went down when I.
Oh no, we can hear you clearly, Paul. That's
Okay,
great. Yeah.
So,
I'm having a hard
you
time
saw
hearing you
last,
guys.
as you saw last week, we found this thing in the, Ryan Potter, citizen investigator, found this mention in the Mass Casualty Commission report. It's COMM 0006361 around page, I think it was 473, 474 of a 1,400 page document that refers to Peter Allen Griffon from Portapic as having a handler, which only suggests one thing. And what are your thoughts on that?
I think just give me 1 second, Paul. I'm having a hard time hearing you guys. I don't know if my volume stay up for some reason. There. So I'm not in the car this time, but I'm not able to get the volume to stay on.
Well, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, well, hopefully I'll be able to hear you enough to answer the questions.
And the
So,
pages were actually pages 743 and 744. That's what I get for trying to remember it all. But com
well, just
6361.
as a caveat on that, I mean, I anything I'll answer, I'll just say it's obviously in hypothetical. So, because I don't know for sure if this guy is an agent, and I certainly don't. I mean, it certainly sounds like there would be no other explanation. Um, but again, I'm always worried about outing people. So let's.
Well, you haven't outed them. They have outed him. And I've had some thoughts about this. Like how did this reference not get redacted, or how did it get included? Or was it sort of the RCMP and the government playing, if we redact it, people will be curious about what that is, and then they'll fight to get it out, and we'll draw attention to it. Maybe we'll just put it in a bunch of boring emails and people will slide by it, everyone but Ryan Potter. And he saw it. I mean, what do you think about it, Adam? I mean,
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
oh,
that makes
sorry.
some sense though, doesn't it, Paul? Like if it's you're into page 700 of a 1,400 page document. I mean, this is War and Peace level kind of reading. And if you get in that far and especially if you've gone through and you're like, boy, there's nothing here, there's nothing here. By the time you get to page 250, well, you've probably given up and you're just kind of scanning from that point for anything that's in bold or anything that's redacted, which would draw your eye. You would otherwise just keep reading through or just flip, 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 flip and go to the next document. So I think that was probably, well, I tend to think things just get missed, but
Well, Adam, I've I've had to go through an awful lot of disclosure between the civil suits I've had and obviously in the criminal trials, 19 years of them. So a lot of prep work.
yeah.
Um, and they have a disclosure unit in the RCMP that's all they do is redact and go through documents. So in my experience, I would say, is it incompetence? Or is it a miss or is it deliberate? Because I've seen an awful lot of deliberate material left in. I don't know. It's an odd thing for sure.
One could imagine that, if, for example, if the police didn't like a source, had a falling out of some sort, that they could just forget to redact something and all of a sudden it gets exposed and then the person's at risk. Might be a danger for a source. You ever consider that, Paul Derry, as a one of the among the many risks that you were taking?
I've thought almost everything you can imagine when it comes to the RCMP. Well, when I first went into witness protection, um, you remember I had just finished watching them allow a murder to take place.
Yeah.
So my trust level going into the program was insanely low, especially since my first handler was the guy who allowed it all to happen, which to me is beyond baffling. So, in watching all of the things that happened in that case, it's certainly, and now reading all the disclosure that I have, and I've read thousands and thousands and thousands of documents. And nothing now surprises me by the RCMP, except it surprises me that they haven't done something about. I mean, this guy's obviously still in the street. That's scary. If he is an informant or an agent and was acting as an agent, um, why is he still in the crowds that he is, and why haven't they done something about that?
Well, here's a twist. You've been there and you should know this, that either side of this agent police deal must agree to let any information out, even after death. So people are protected after death if they're agents. This seeming mistake on the MCC documents suggests that if Griffon was an agent and he was outed by this, doesn't he have a lawsuit against the RCMP and the government now?
I would think, here's the thing with, I mean, we always got to look at informant. Okay, so source handler. We got a handler, we got a source. Anytime a source is being directed, technically, or, by the law, he's considered doing agent work. And if he's just an informant giving information, then he's covered under informant's privilege. Both of those have a much different standard to what can be said about them. Obviously, an informant has informant's privilege. Um, Now, an agent, you'd think you'd want to protect your agents, but I don't. This is a very strange thing. I mean, for the longest time, and I disagreed with you in the beginning that Wortman was an agent. It just seems so odd to me. Um, but now, bringing out that this guy potentially was doing any kind of agent work, it kind of changes the picture a little. So.
Well, how would it change the picture, Paul Derry? I mean, if somebody that would you ever see two agents, I guess, working on the same operation, and would they always know that the other person is an agent? And how would that typically unfold, or is there a typical?
Well, I don't know if you would. Well, you certainly wouldn't know probably. I've had another informant working against me while I was working against him, as we were both targets by the same and the same handler was using us, and we didn't know. Our pagers went off, and I went and picked it up thinking it was for me, and I actually had the wrong pager, and it was for him, but it was my handler's number, so. I quickly recognized that I was a target, and so was he. Um, but no, I think if I mean, again, in hypotheticals, if this guy is an agent, it would point to me that Wortman was probably more likely a target than working with them.
That's what I thought. And I just had this revelation the other day, looking back and thinking about Griffin. And I'm starting to wonder if he always was an agent and not a criminal. Because if you look back to his arrest in 2014 in Alberta, where he's linked up with La Familia and MS-13 and the Hells Angels and all this stuff, he gets arrested. He has guns, heavy weight in cocaine, bad dealings, national security investigation, but he's paroled out or bailed out and then goes back to Nova Scotia. And then in Nova Scotia, he suddenly gets busted and sent back to Alberta saying he violated his bail. And he said, "Oh, I made a mistake. I thought I was going back to my family's house and stuff like that." And okay, no harm, no foul. And then the next thing you know, he's back while he's supposedly in jail in Alberta, Separate sources have told me this week. Now that the cat's out of the bag, I have one policing source who said, yeah, I couldn't tell you before, but now that the cat's out of the bag, we were told in 2017 that he was incoming as an agent.
Hmm.
And I said, well, how could we prove that? He said, well, there was two of us there who were told it. And but he was supposedly in jail. He didn't get parole till 2018. And then I checked with someone else in the community and found out Griffon was actually here in 2000 in Nova Scotia in 2017, living at his grandmother's place in Spring Hill. And then he goes back in 2018, gets parole, comes back here. Um, it makes me wonder if both he and Wortman were agents because he's been there since 2018. Wortman wasn't wrapped up at all in that 2-3 year period. What's really good, and I've talked to other agents this week, former agents, who said they've been in situations where there's been all their friends turned out to be agents, just like you're saying, like five of them. They thought they were working on the case alone. No, there was five of them working on the case and vetting each other. So
Well, I
I'll
think
come back to you.
there's often, many, the police have sources all through the criminal community. Most people are about as solid as a soup sandwich. So, I mean, there's no shortage of informants in their world. I think one of the things is an informant is always looking, any long-term informant like I was, is always looking for an agent job because there's only so many jobs, approved because there's only so much funding available. So, as an informant, you're always looking for the best targets to bring forward to your handler because he's got to justify trying to get the funding for his operation as opposed to all the others that are vying for that same money. So it's not surprising that, I mean, I traveled all over Canada, did informant work. So acting as a source, looking for that right job, always trying to get that big score where you get the right targets and always bringing those through so that you're always giving intel, hoping it will turn into an agent job where you're getting paid, much higher money than just providing intel.
So
It's
Paul,
funny. Before I say that, I
yeah.
heard from one of the other former agents this week that he tried to get his son to be an agent. He said it's good money.
Oh,
Yeah, it's exactly what you're saying.
yeah. Yeah.
It's the same kind of question. Like, so how often would then an informant, like, is this a sort of a daily thing or a monthly thing where you're like, all right, well, I want to find the next issue, the next job, the next, are you working with the same officer? Are you talking to other officers trying to figure out
Well,
how you can get involved in the next thing?
yeah, and if you read my book, Inside a Police Informant's Mind, I flesh this out a little bit. Cabana, the deputy commissioner, who was my former deputy commissioner, was my long-term handler. I mean, I always trusted him, so I always went to him for approval of anybody. But you are an institutional asset to them. You're an asset of the institution, not the person. So you kind of get passed around, and so if I would finish one job or gave intel and didn't need to testify, they would give me a number to find out where I'm going next and say, here, look this guy up when you get there, and they would set you up and send you into a place, maybe cold calls, whatever. So you're always an institutional asset that's available to them, and it's again, the goal is always to get the big payoffs, right? So
A number of my sources said this week that to them, it appeared that that Griffon was an agent in Alberta, much as I'm suggesting earlier, and that he came down here as with a record. It's like they created a legend for him that he has an MS-13 background, La Familia background that would make him appealing as an agent down here in Nova Scotia. That's what it looks like to me, much like the Maher Arar case we talked in the past. They created a legend with all these court documents, but he was never really in jail. He was always, even after the mass casualty, he gets violated for his parole, goes to jail for one day, and is back at home. Like
Yeah, it's
I
amazing. I
never do
mean,
anything wrong.
contextually, I got to put it into my time period, when I was last working, because I obviously, been more of a justice advocate for the last 25 years, but pre 2000, it was nothing to, for my handlers to have parole connections and, get me in or in jail. And they've done both with me, put me in a jail and got me out. In fact, they put me back in prison after the Danny Kane and Amy Samard incident. They wanted them in the middle of an operation that had been approved for me, but then they got those two. So, well, it was easier to put me back in jail for a bit. They've also put me in jail to do work and go after targets. And they've used me in institutions to go after targets. So, I mean, again, you're an institutional asset. They will do what they can and move you around. And you were talking about the decals, when we were talking earlier, uh, offline, obviously, you had talked about the decals being potentially, if Griffin had put them on, if that was realistic, that could have been just easily a prop as part of an operation to, and I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying if he had decals and the RCMP did give them to him, I've had many things that they've used as props for me, whether it be flash rolls or cars or houses or phony warrants. My last operation, I gave Neil Smith a phony warrant just to get him to talk. So, and to get you in closer, they'll give you things to help you get closer to someone. So, I mean, every situation is a little bit more elaborate. One of my operations, we had a full tractor trailer full of boxes of cigarettes, and the idea was we were, the undercover agent that I was going to introduce was he was stealing tobacco boxes of cigarettes off the back of the dock and could get them for us. So we would trade with the drug dealers boxes of cigarettes for hash and cocaine. So there's some pretty elaborate things they'll do so to get you in closer to people.
So think about it this, all right, let's explore that a little bit. So if indeed the RCMP was giving Peter Griffon the decals, supplying them to him, I think the allegation had been that he was making them at some sign shop where he was working. If they were giving him those, it would be to ingratiate him into Gabriel, like to get Gabriel Wortman to trust him. Say, all right, here I can get these for you. Hey, we're working together, or I'm helping you do something. To what end? Like to what? How would that work? And what
It
would
would
you
get him. It
think?
would get him closer. It would build trust with Wortman. I mean, I mean, the more you can do for somebody in the criminal world, the more connections. There's often I said, hey, I got a lawyer on the take. I can get you information that you can't really get. And actually, I was just getting the information from my handler, and I would take information back to these guys to let them know I was connected to somebody that was beneficial to them.
Yeah,
And back then it would be, say, running CPICs, which we know you would never be able to do today. But we could easily say, okay, so you have a stolen car. In fact, I'll give you an example. There was a stolen car filled with weapons. Two guys escaped from penitentiary in Nova Scotia. And, while I'm traveling with them for weeks, they're being monitored, all of us together. But I'm in the car with them and traveling with them. Every time I got out to go use a payphone, because we didn't have the luxury of cell phones then, but I would say, I can get the CPEC run by my lawyer. He can do this, and we can check the status of the car to see if it's still stolen, when really I was just going to my handler. Um, but it gave me credibility. So the more credibility you get by little things like that. So I'm not saying that's what the RCMP did. I'm just saying that if he had them and he did come from them, it would be. But if you did, if you're going to give something like that for a prop, I would, cover teams are very important, and you know, if I was given money, for example, as a flash roll, there was somebody that watched everything to do with that money. It didn't, it wasn't just here you go, take it and go do what you want. See you next week. I mean, it's very monitored. How would why
Well,
would if you gave decals to someone? And again, I'm not saying that they did. I'm just going by the information you guys have shared. But if they did do that, why wouldn't somebody be monitoring everything to do with with the car and the decals?
well,
You
maybe
know.
they were. I mean, if you go back to this hit Griffin, I always thought I always said Wortman was an agent or someone in his circle was an agent or all of them were agents. A bunch of them were. With this information coming, and the reason I did that was because the RCMP response to the Nova Scotia massacres was the same response you'd have for a blown undercover operation. Don't alert any other police forces, keep it self-contained, keep it within your district. So it was like the negative proof. Like, why did they do it this way? There's a logic to it. And I looked at the logic. Then looking at the decals, a couple of key pieces of evidence from the Mass Casualty Commission suggest that, in 2019, there's an exchange between Lisa Banfield, whose book is coming out and will probably reveal all of this in detail.
No doubt.
Joke, wink, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Um, that there's an exchange of emails where Wortman is now the sheriff and he's got some new position as sheriff, as a joke, and he calls her the deputy and stuff like that. This is around the time he's building the police cars. Uh, the RCMP played this off as, oh, he was a police fanatic and he was doing this on his own and it wasn't right, it was illegal. And Wortman always said, oh, everyone knows about this. The RCMP knows about this. He was that kind of guy. And then you have Griffon, who's his buddy and neighbor. Griffon, the last person to see him before the rampage, was the guy who put the decals on the car. And now we find out he's likely an agent. It looks like this is all part of some grand operation, either targeting Wortman or they're inadvertently working together targeting someone else.
Well, I mean,
Or whatever.
Wortman was right next to the Hells. Well, I don't know if it's the Hells Angels, probably the Darksiders at that point, I think, on Portland. Um, I haven't been there in a while, but I think it was the Darksiders at that old clubhouse now. So there's certainly target material around them. Um,
Well, the other target, but there was a case going on too. Um, in the days before he had an incident in February 12th, 2020, where he locked his police car in his yard in Dartmouth, in his Dittress yard, and refused to let them out and created a big scene. And then after it was all done, had Lisa film it and then give it to Frank magazine to generate publicity that he was in a fight with the police. And then later that day, he gets a ticket from Constable Nick Dorrington. Um, it's all pretty, what is really going on. And well, at that time, just before that happened, the police put out a press release on the murder of Tony Walsh in Truro, nearby. And they were closing in on the suspect. Was Wortman and Griffon involved in that? Because that was a anti-biker operation, the Redneck Mountain Men, who were Hell's Angels affiliates as well. And I can see there were relationships between Griffon and Wortman and that biker club during that period. Was that the target, in that particular case, the Tony Walsh murder, trying to solve it? Because they did eventually found his body, and two people were charged with murder. One died. Dan McNeil, the president of the club, died since. So there were
well,
things
I
in the
mean,
neighborhood.
I like the reverse idea, but I mean their response, the response to all of it. I mean, the systemic rot within the system, and I mean all areas of the system, not just the RCMP, the justice system, as I'm sure Adam would attest to. I mean, the lawfare and the just the craziness that's in it. It's always about optics, right? It's always about liability and optics, and protect your brand and your image. Um, but I mean, H division seems to have taken that to and it seems like it's always been happening for as long as I remember in H division. There always seems to have been at higher levels this desire, and I'm not even talking about Ottawa. Ottawa does their own, and they have a communications department that's bar none. But H Division specifically seems to have always had these rogue cops who do what they want and seem to get away with it, and and that the optics are always about them, looking good rather than lay down, down, down.
Yes, I'm
I can
talking
agree
about.
with you. We've heard that from other
Sorry,
guests
Yeah, are
about
you
I got a
talking to us there,
165 pound
Paul?
cane
the
corso here about to knock my
The
stove
whole thing
over.
about H division. I mean, we've had Kurt Allen, former deputy commissioner, of the RCMP, on who called it lazy H, that no one who was going anywhere was in H division, you know?
Yeah. Well,
Well,
I
the
mean,
other thing
obviously
that
my
jumps out
experiences
though,
there were not good. So, um, I might have a little bit of bias there, but I mean, eh, like,
the other thing on optics though is, immediately after the shootings, uh, it comes out that Griffon has, been an essential element to helping out Gabriel Wortman get away and get the vehicle. And, without that vehicle, how many fewer people would have been killed? We don't know, right? But what happens to him? Basically next to nothing.
He
So
got rescued before the kids in the basement,
he gets rescued.
which was a tip off right away. There's something wrong with this because why was Peter Griffon rescued? Well, the kids in the basement spent 3 hours or so in the basement after their parents had been murdered,
And
and
nearly
the
no
RCMP showed no inclination to rescue them.
and barely a consequence to his participation in, the large mass shootings, right? Like that all kind of points to him being an agent and having that relationship.
I think it comes back to the same old problem with the RCMP, though. They just don't know how to admit they did something wrong, or if they just learn that the public is actually pretty forgiving, if you just tell the truth and say, hey, this is what we were attempting to do, and but they're you know so worried about it's always a cover your ass mentality instead of accept responsibility, suck up the consequences. Yet that's what they want everybody else to do, right? I mean, you as a criminal lawyer, I'm sure know that more than anybody. What happens when I get arrested? Well, you want me to go admit immediately that I've made mistakes. You're going to put me in jail. You want me to pay some kind of consequence for restitution, time, whatever. While I'm in jail, you want to make sure that I show that I am remorseful for the things I've done, and then you'll consider letting me back into society. Yet they do exactly the opposite. You know, they hide everything and do everything against what they hold everybody else to. Um, it's time they just started, taking responsibility for any actions, and it's specifically for their agents and informants. If you're gonna take on people who look, we're hard to handle. I was not an easy agent to handle. I was manipulative. I was out for me. They trained me. I mean, from 15 on. I mean, I learned from the best. Um, but they've got to start taking responsibility for those things and for the consequences. These deaths that do take place, and they're more. I mean, we can go back to another case with another agent in that was in Nova Scotia, Fredericton, ended up shooting himself supposedly with a flare gun. The Corey Patterson story back in the 90s. How many people died at his hands? Well, H Division, same handler that allowed the murder to happen in my case, moved him around and tried to protect him and change the optics and change the narrative. This is a continuing behavior. So does any of it surprise me anymore? Not at all. I mean, I know I said I'm talking in hypotheticals, and I am because I don't know. I don't follow this case as much as you guys do, but I do know the RCMP well enough to know that nothing's beyond this kind of thing anymore. Maybe at one time I would have stuck up for them more, but maybe individual officers, but it's getting
Yeah,
pretty
they're not all
insane.
bad. They're not all bad, but I mean,
No,
there is the system, and you've got people in key positions who, over the years, are bad.
Oh,
They shouldn't be there. I mean, no, you raised the question. They bury things. Hey, the one thing they buried, and I won't give up on, who killed Corey Ellison? Come on, tell me.
yeah,
Because the evidence suggests they accidentally killed him. If they had admitted that, that would have been fine. People would have forgiven him. It was a hairy situation.
yeah.
But they manipulated all the evidence to try to make it look like Wortman did it. And it's quite clear Wortman wasn't there. The evidence doesn't put him there, it puts them there.
Well, unfortunately, you end up with all these the higher up they go and the more politically motivated they get, and the more they're in this old boys club, and it is an old boys club, I mean, it's insane. The further up you go and the more you look at it, the more you see it. And if you don't, if you actually have ethics and don't care about politics and you actually just care about doing the right thing, and that is the majority of police officers. Um, but that's why they don't ever progress anywhere, and they're always held down. And the Secrecies Act is so held over them like a hammer over their head, a big stick to make sure they never say anything. And it's drilled in them from depot on. How one, that you belong to a family, yeah, the most dysfunctional family I could ever imagine. But then on top of it, then they have this stick over them all the time, and how horrible it is for them if they ever go against, the force. Well, unfortunately, it's all the good ethical cops that end up getting stepped on and dragged down. And if you ever try to speak out against that club at the top, and that doesn't mean every single one at the top, but I would say I, I'd be hard pressed to find somebody, I would say, ever on the executive board that I feel comfortable to say. I believe they're integral to the Buffalo, not integral to any real morals.
Seems as well, Paul, like, they'll go to some extremes to cover up any mistakes that are made in an agent or informant situation. Here with Wortman, I mean, they didn't allow any outside investigators to begin with, and just kind of shut down any inquiries in that area. And the are there examples in your life, in your career, of that where something's gone wrong with an agent and the RCMP have just, well, we cannot reveal that this was an agent situation that got messed up, and we're going to make up another story or just not reveal things or cover up evidence? Like, is that something that you've seen?
Well, I think I've seen it in lots of cases all around me. I mean, I won't give individual ones,
No,
but
no.
yeah, I mean, if you could be around some of the conversations I've heard by people and comments made at the top, and it's very sad. It's they eat their own, and if they won't take care of their own, um, it's amazing that they hide informants. Well, why would they hide an informant or an agent's wrongdoings other than it's either going to make them look bad or there's so much more benefit still to keeping them around. Um, it's there's just no ethics there. There's no morals. I mean, you've done the Desmond inquiry. I mean, I'm sure you got a good example of um, just how good they are at spinning narratives and lies, just even in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a few years since that report, and yeah, there was a lot going on in that situation through the military as well. But
Yep.
yeah, that's the kind of stuff I wonder about with, when you get into a force like this and they're trying to protect their reputation, and they don't want any negativity out there, even though of course it is. Um,
Well, it looks worse on them. It just looks worse on them. They're losing all trust, and it's at this point that they don't even care. Like they just do it blatantly. They're so arrogant or so stupid, and I'm not sure which it is. I really am not sure. I made a post on LinkedIn. If you ever follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see.
yeah.
I sometimes say things like, okay, you guys are crucifying the very people are trained in investigating people. Like, do you not have skeletons in your closet you're worried about? Like, people that they're crushing now, the Rhonda Blackmores, the Billy Mikers, the people like that, Peter Merrifields. Do you not understand that these people actually have the skills, people like me, to dig up all the skeletons in your closet? Are you that arrogant or are you that stupid? I'm just not sure which it is.
I suspect it's both. Those two things can often go together, I think.
I
I have one,
agree.
one last question. You were recruited when you were 15, and then we came across someone else. I've known for a while, but we're talking to him this week, and I put you on to this person. We're not naming him, who was recruited when they were 16. How much is going on with young people recruiting them as agents, informants, and agents? I mean, that just strikes me as sort of immoral.
Well, it's 60 years old now. I look back on it and I can tell you that I have real issues with it, especially now watching my children grow up. And it's sad, but the truth is, I spoke at a source handling course for the RCMP. And this was only probably 2016, 2017, not long before I had a breakdown. And one of the things, and I'll give credit to the guy that was running the program. He wasn't influenced much. He said, "No, I want you to talk about that your experience being recruited at 15, even though everybody else higher up doesn't want to admit it was 15. They want to bring it up to 18." He said, "I want you to talk about it." I actually have a recording of that course. I recorded them with my phone, and he wanted me to talk about it because it is wrong, and they know it's wrong today, and they have strict rules around it, but they still do it. And it's like, think about even 17, 18. How do the consequences of that long term at that age? I mean, you barely know what's going to happen, in a month from now to your actions. You haven't put actions consequences together yet, for the most part. You can't see past the end of your nose, but yet they're putting you in positions that long term are likely to get you killed.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible at that age. People, kids are having a hard time picking out their courses in high school, and they're expected to make these kind of decisions.
Yeah, yeah. And then you have, and I put up this week, I mean, and you're part of, you're in the system, and God love you. I don't know how you make it through it. But I look at somebody like the Justice Minister, Sean Fraser, like, here he is, what a role, DOJ and Attorney General. And, he's overseeing a system that he's never really been a part of. I mean, other than from an academic perspective, he's never been in any one role even long enough. And I don't know the guy, but I just look at, shouldn't we have people that actually understand these things and how they affect boots on the ground, and these investigations and the systems, whether it be civil or criminal, or what parts of the justice system, whether it be parole or sentencing. And I see this with sentencing a lot. I mean, these people don't even understand sentencing. People are applauding when somebody gets, a 4-year sentence that should be a 10-year sentence, and they have no idea even anything about the parole system, or and these are the people that are, you know, playing with people's lives and their freedoms, um, and they don't understand anything about it.
Last question. We're running out of time here. The use of informants, it's get to the point where I was joking with Chad Jones and Ryan Potter the other day. There's so many informants, it seems, in the community. You see why people are afraid, especially if they're on the edges, because they don't know who's not an informant or an agent. I said, I'm sure the three of us are not informants, you either, Adam, but I'm a little shaky about a couple of them. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But
How can you tell? Yeah.
yeah, how can you tell? The point is, the use of informants and agents, is it a reflection of the inadequacies of the RCMP, especially in rural communities, where they move people through every couple of years and no one has a firm grip of who's who in the community? So the development of agents and informants is a shortcut to good policing. Does that make sense to you? And it's not the right thing. Instead of having good, solid policing with built up institutional knowledge, they're just buying it off the shelf, as it were, in the community and putting people at risk and basically possibly perverting the justice system at the same time.
Well, you know what? I think at the end of the day, I mean, the truth is police can't solve crimes without informants. Otherwise, you're only going to catch stupid criminals. Not that most criminals aren't fairly stupid. So you've got a lot of low hanging fruit there that is available to you, but you're not. Police can't get in. I mean, especially you take a place like where you guys are on the East Coast. I mean, most criminals are, it's very family oriented. You look back at the Marriotts and the Melvin, it's a very, everybody knows everybody, everybody grew up together. Even the police, grew up with everybody. So it's very difficult for police to get in with anybody. So, I mean, you have to recruit informants and agents. You have to use them. I mean, they're essential. Human sources are essential to policing. So, and as far as no, I mean, almost everybody, like I said, is about as solid as a soup sandwich. So they're on every street corner. They're everywhere. I mean, if I look at my 7 years that I did in prison, and I look at how many people were actually so-called, solid, well, you can't have solidarity amongst the self-centered people. So the code is ridiculous. It's non-existent. Um, it's made to keep the people at the bottom believing there's some kind of code to live by, so the people at the top can keep making money. Um, the police look at it as just a game, and these people are all collateral damage. So it's all about takedowns for them and the big party after the takedown, and that's unfortunate. And it's bred into the system. It is a system problem. So it is a problem with the system that they view it that way, because the gravity of dealing with human sources is not put across to them other than as an institutional asset, not as human beings and the way they need to be looked at. So what are you going to end up with besides, a lot of messes? I mean, you're dealing with human beings, and you're usually dealing with screwed up human beings, and then you only see them as an asset, an institutional asset, to use and do your bidding, and then kick to the curb. I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. So yes, I think better training at Depot would help, and better source handling, and teaching them the human side of it would help. But again, we still won't ever get past the accountability aspect, because they're always going to be loyal to the buffalo, not to the public. They don't care about the public. They care about their reputation. They care about the public to this degree. How can we please them and tickle their ears enough to keep getting the funding that we need and justify the taxpayers' money coming to us?
I
Well,
think that sums it up
I
today.
think it does. So, Paul Derry, listen, you've got great insights into this, and this is the topic that we wanted to cover, given the revelations of last week. And certainly, you've seen it inside out. You're a realist, but if I'm reading between the lines, you still have some part of you that's a naive idealist in some ways too, and I mean that in a good way. That's uh,
Hoping,
that's a good
hoping.
good mindset to keep in some respects, certainly to hope for the future. So that's what we do. So thank you very much, Paul. Thanks for giving us your time and your expertise again today, and no doubt we'll be calling upon you again in the future.
Yeah. Great
Well,
job. Great to hear you.
you
Yeah.
know what? Thanks again, and thanks for the recipe. I look forward to trying it. When I'm on again, I'll let you know how it worked out.
Oh, he asked for lasagna recipe. It's a little complicated, right?
Yeah. I'm giving it to my wife because I'm not taking 3 days to do it.
See you later.
That's great.
Take
Thanks
care, bud.
again, Paul.
Later.
All right, well, that's everybody's onto this lasagna, Paul. You're giving that out too much, maybe. No, this is great. I wouldn't take 3 days either, but I'd love to take
I
another
make it over
day.
3 days rather than killing yourself in one day. Make the sauce, make some of the fillings, make it. There's bechamel sauce. You've got to make all these things.
Well, I know with 3 days, I'd take it as part of a three-course meal, so maybe someday. So, Paul, what do you think? What did you get from that?
Well, as I said, it makes me think that there was an operation going on. That Wortman and Griff were part of an RCMP operation, and that for them to pin this all on Wortman going crazy because of a domestic, while having Griffin looks like he was an agent. Looking back at his career and the way he stayed out of jail is basically what Paul Derry is describing,
Yeah,
and that why is he still on the street? And the other thing is the RCMP, government, the media. I've passed this tip on to every major media outlet, to politicians or whatever. Not a word has been said this week.
that's what I was wondering about because this is it's it's breaking news. It's new information, significant information that could reframe the analysis, the mainstream analysis of the Nova Scotia mass shootings. And where is it?
Well,
It's credible.
they'd have to say Paul Palango and Adam Rogers and all those wackos they're dealing with are not conspiracy theorists. They were right that there was
Wow.
more going on here than met the eye and what the government was saying and the RCMP was saying.
I guess so. Here's one last thing that jumped in my mind from what Paul was saying. All right, let's see whether Peter Griffon sues the RCMP for leaving this word unredacted and leaving that paragraph or however much of it that now effectively reveals him as an RCMP agent. And will he take action against them? And if so, that might mean something. And how much of an impact has it made? If not, that also might mean something. That might also mean that that was a deliberate omission and one that he was aware was taking place. So.
I don't see what the benefit is to him because he, like at the basic level, if there is a suggestion that Wortman was being threatened
Hmm.
at the end, that his cover was blown. If Griffin was part of that, Griffin could plausibly say, as somebody said to me this week, Griffin could say to the bad guys, "Well, look, he's got the police car. It ain't me."
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Well, remains to
Yeah,
be seen then, yeah, where that goes. So we're gonna bring in some other guests in the next few weeks, Paul, to I guess elaborate on this further. And
for
there's
sure. I
yeah,
think it's an important topic.
and lots of other things to cover too. We bring a little bit for everybody, and like I said, I want to thank Paul Derry for coming on, and thank everybody for watching and listening, especially to.
Wait.
Oh
One
yeah,
more.
yeah, keep going, yeah,
I had two things. One, I had somebody again asking about the glass pumpkin.
yeah.
Somebody wanted to come to our studio and buy a glass pumpkin or a cat. I don't make the glass pumpkins. We don't make them. We got that from Martha's Vineyard, but we did notice there's a store that's making smaller ones, glass blowers on Peggy's Cove glass on Peggy's Cove Road between Tantallon and Peggy's Cove. They're making glass pumpkins similar to this,
Can
smaller,
they do
different
the
size.
swirl on there, Paul? Like
Yeah,
that
it
looks like
takes
a
two
little pig's
different
tail. It
people,
looks
yeah, to do
impossible.
it at the same time. It's
Oh, okay.
complicated to do. They have some there, and I talked to the artist, and they talked about, oh yeah, we'd like to try a bigger one because I showed them a picture of how big mine is.
Yeah.
So anyway, Cove Glass makes little glass pumpkins or smaller ones similar to this.
Well, get them soon
And
because
sec
once people hear this, that they're going to be sold out.
and secondly, a case coming up this week that we should be keenly interested in is the Narwhal magazine against the RCMP.
Yes,
which
I read
case
about
which
this.
starts tomorrow in Vancouver. The Narwhal magazine being an online magazine, very good about nature and the environment and stuff like that. And a reporter for the Narwhal years ago, 3 years ago, was arrested by the RCMP while covering the wet sweat and crisis. shouldn't have been, had identification, everything. The Mounties just arrested her. It's basically
Yeah.
the same attitude we talked about in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Refusing to expect, to defend free speech, refusing to defend a journalist, and just arresting them because they see them as a nuisance impeding their way or possibly embarrassing them.
Yeah.
So this case is a freedom of the press case, one of the first good ones in Canada. It starts tomorrow in Vancouver.
Well, that's going to be good to watch, and we'll report back on that next week, and along with whatever else is happening in the world that is of interest. And we're going to follow up on our main story as well with guests and with more analysis. So we look forward to bringing that to everybody. And in the meantime, share this with a friend, with colleagues, and let's build the audience and maybe get some pressure on some officials to take some action on some of these issues. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for
Have a
listening.
great week.
We'll see you next time.
See you.
Bye bye.